Hey, what's up? I'm Guy.
I'm John.
It's our YouTube channel. Subscribe to it and give this video a like.
Yep. Podcast below in the description. Go check that out right now.
Okay, John. You reached into your web of NFL connections, and we got something meaty here. How are people ranking the three quarterbacks that we're spending all our time talking about? It's funny that all the ranks are like actually quarterbacks 3, 4, and 5.
Yeah.
As the way this draft is going, we think it's going to go. So, that's where when someone has one of these guys ahead of Zach Wilson, it becomes interesting. But, okay, you asked somebody, you set it up. Here we go. What you got?
Well, it's a little bit like, who's the best player in the NBA? Not named LeBron, right? Like that's
Exactly.
all. That's kind of the way this has become.
Yeah.
And now you also throw Zach Wilson, because it's become a very polarizing thing. And if you follow me on Twitter, I'm fucking around a little bit.
On
with
the Mac Jones
thing. But though I do think it's funny.
To keep your own sanity, I think it's to keep yourself prepared, keep your shield up, guarding against the potential.
Yeah. Sources also might tell you that, we've reached out. We would love to have Mac on the podcast. So,
Mac Jones pod.
I have defended him. Like, I think he's a better player than the way Twitter talks about him. But I went to my number one guy. I cast a big web, talked to multiple people, and I got different lists.
We should do a separate video where we rank the sources by name, and then they, like, John, you had me at 3. You're like, well, give me better stuff.
Here's my source.
Don't call Schefter first next time.
Here's my source that has multiple rings and who has been right on basically everything.
Belichick.
He's the best. He's as good of a scout as I know. It wouldn't be Belichick because he's not a great scout. This guy nailed Josh Allen. I mean, absolutely nailed him. Told me I was an idiot, and he was right. And he, without hesitation, said Fields, Lance, Mac. That was his order. And that would probably, after really taking in some information yesterday, just some YouTubes, I was talking to a buddy that does the SEC, and as he called, because I had called him, I was watching what was I watching? Jamar Chase tape. But it's YouTube tape now. I'm in the media, whatever we do, whatever you want to consider it. And my buddy, I couldn't press pause fast enough. He's like, I hear announcers. Is that the film you watch? I'm like, yeah, bro. I'm not fucking watching all 22 on Jamar Chase. I just want to watch the highlights. But he went Fields, Lance, and Mac. And I think when you come to the scouting community, the guys that truly know what they're talking about, I think that's where they're going to lean. Now, another guy who I trust pretty hardcore just had Lance and Fields flipped. I just think the scouting community is going to lean those two guys well above Mac. Every single person I talk to that has that mindset doesn't have Mac in those guys' category simply because part of a scout's job, and as Mel Kiper told us, and he went on that rant, was like the anticipatory scouting. It's like we're not plugging and playing Justin Fields. Even though, hypothetically, if Justin Fields is drafted 3rd, everyone's going to want Jimmy immediately traded, as they should, and just play Justin Fields from the jump. But it's going to be a learning process, which we're cool with. Like, this is not signing the Patriots Matthew Judon, and just Matthew Judon is going to be asked to do exactly what he did in Baltimore, because that's what you do with free agents. These guys are not free agents. These guys are 21 and 22-year-old raw products. Now, Mac Jones is the most pro quote ready guy, but he still, like, in theory would have to get better, right? Hopefully he improves. But my guys were all having, the guy I trust the most, Fields, Lance, Mac. That's where I lean. And like, I've come as of April 1st, I think they should draft Justin Fields. Like, that would be he has the highest upside. He has the most to work with.
He's more ready to play than Lance.
But that to me doesn't bother me as much. I just started hearing some comparisons in the scouting community about Kaepernick, coming out of school, like at Nevada, kind of that type of athlete, which now Kaepernick would be viewed coming out really highly, right? That Nevada version, he would never last in the 2nd round in today's climate.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And I just think, like, again, Mel also told us just raw, needs a lot of work with Lance. That doesn't bother me either. Like, I'm cool with working with someone. I just think Fields' upside is equally, if not higher, than Trey Lance. But I wouldn't be mad about Trey Lance. I'm just saying, to me, I'd only be mad. Like, I just think you can't take the guy with the less ceiling. I can't believe in that.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about Mac Jones as it relates to this conversation is that we talk about him like he's the safest guy of the group. But we wouldn't talk about Mac Jones as safe if Mac Jones were the only quarterback in this draft. If I said the way we talk about Mac is like, well, the good news with Mac Jones is at least you could compete right away. Well, if we weren't comparing him to anybody else, nobody would talk like that. Because nobody, the list of surefire quarterbacks coming out of college, you could probably put on one hand, right?
Let's say the two people in this draft were Trevor Lawrence and Mac Jones. I don't think we'd be talking about the Jets trading Sam Darnold, would we?
No, Mac. Well, would Mac go in the top 10?
Well,
I think the more guys you get, just the more urgency there becomes. Like, I think the fact
here's where, and we talked about this the other day. It's not just the more guys. If there were 3 Macs, I think it'd be like, eh. There are non-Trevor Lawrence who just takes the number 1 spot. There is Zach Wilson, who is a really toolsy, turns out he's bigger than we thought, big-time prospect. And then there are just 2 quote-unquote rawer guys with just elite physical attributes in Fields and Lance. Like, that to me is like, you throw guys like that into the mix, plus arms, plus athletes, good character. It's like, those guys just go now. Like Josh Allen types, even Justin Herbert types, right? Justin Herbert, quote-unquote, looking back, kind of fell. He still went 6th.
Yeah, which was where we thought he was going to go the year before, about. He was at 5 to 10 range.
But, like, even when the dust settles one day and we talk about Justin Herbert's career, he did go 6 overall. It'd never be like he got screwed. Like, he still went really, really high. Could he have gone higher? Sure. But it's not. To me, there's one thing, like, Rodgers went 24. To me, there's a big difference like 24 and 6, right?
Yeah, I think with Herbert, it's less about the number and more about the fact that Tua went ahead of him.
Yeah, it's just that's going to be compared. But which 5 and 6.
When you get drafted close to guys, that's like the same thing will happen here. It's particularly with Zach. Like, that would be my follow-up question for anybody in the league when we talk about their rankings is because we all think Zach Wilson's going to go second, we don't really include him in this. But I would imagine there's a fair number of people that have one of these 3 guys ahead of Zach Wilson. I don't know if it's the majority. I don't know. But the idea that you could have Justin Fields ahead of Zach Wilson.
Would you feel great as Joe Douglas putting – when I say putting your career, he signed a 6-year, $6 million deal. So, I mean, he made – that's – I know the many people on social media think you can only make generational wealth if you get $100 million. In the real world, $36 million, Joe Douglas is generational wealthy now. Like, that's a stupid amount of money. So even if one day he loses his job with the Jets, like he made it, like he got it done. But his reputation as a scout and as a career, would you feel comfortable taking Zach Wilson from Utah to New York and the small sample size? Like my point is like we're acting like it's not that risky. Like I think there's a lot more risk than it's just kind of being discussed, right? It almost like, oh, it's just Lawrence and him, like bang, bang, boom, like. Yeah, well, Lawrence is in his own little world. Like, we're acting like Zach Wilson's world is closer to him than these other guys, and that would be my pushback in a draft room.
Yeah, I do think it's risky.
I bet there are some legit arguments going on in draft rooms over Zach Wilson compared to some of these other guys.
Well, Zach Wilson passed Justin Fields, it feels like, after Justin Fields played in the national championship game, but even kind of before. But then Justin had the big Final Four game that was great. So then I felt like he was pushed back ahead. Remember, we talked
beating those random teams.
Yeah, well, he was. But we talked to Louis Riddick right around the time of that Clemson game. And he was like, yeah, this is kind of, even though it's crazy, this is kind of the way it's moved, even in a time when nothing's happened. It happened after, you're right, it was happening during the season too. But I think part of the momentum continued after the regular season ended, before Justin Fields had even played Clemson. Yes. It was like in that window when the season ends and you're waiting for games to start. It kind of happened there. So I would feel nervous about it if I were the Jets, not as much from a could he handle New York standpoint. You know, I think every year that passes, the world gets smaller in the sense that I think it used to be truly you'd walk into the big city and the bright lights would hit you and you'd never been on a stage like that. There's just more attention on everybody everywhere now, no matter where you are.
My guy, though, had a good point, and it never hit me. But he's like, when you get drafted to a Northeast team from the West Coast, there's a time zone difference that sometimes can limit your support system. Like your times are just off. And I'm talking support system just as a 23-year-old, you feel overwhelmed in life. You just want to call someone and talk. And it's not, you can feel a little isolated out. It's a long way away. The people are way different. I mean, New York's a pressure cooker. I guess
Yeah.
my point is that I just think the world is one. It's easier to communicate, but it's still like different times. We deal with calls sometimes. You have Eastern, Pacific time. It just kind of throws you off. Um, I don't know. I
No, that's
think
not
it's
nothing.
always
But
easier to come out west than to go northeast.
yeah, well, there's no question. I agree. We're more welcoming.
Yeah.
But what you just said was where I go back on Mac Jones. It's
Like that's where
I don't
Fields has
think
been in the pressure cooker.
yes,
Right. Georgia, Ohio State.
yeah, yes. But on Mac, that's where I say I think we talk about him like he's not risky. He's as risky. I mean, he's a quarterback getting drafted. Like the guys that aren't risky, you can count on one hand. So Peyton, Luck, Lawrence, we talk about like he's not risky, right? Like it's just a no-brainer. It's what you do. But they're not a lot of those guys, and he's not one of them. So now here's the other thing. I think sometimes, give me your perspective on this. How much a guy has played cuts two ways. Sometimes you haven't played that much, and we say, we don't really know what to know about your tape. You haven't played that many games. Sometimes you haven't played a lot of games, and we say, like in the case of Trey Lance, what has he played? I think in 17 games, 17 or 18 games.
17.
Well, look, think of all the development opportunity there is. He hasn't played that much football, and the football he did play, he was pretty prolific just in terms of touchdown, interception. I think he threw one pick that year that they went to the FCS National Championship game. There's so much upside there. We've only scratched the surface.
I thought it was no picks.
Was it none?
Yeah.
There's so much upside. We've barely scratched the surface, right? And I think we kind of had that conversation at times about Trubisky because Trubisky had not played a lot of football. This year, on a much lower level, we have the conversation as it relates to Davis Mills, but that's different because he had some injuries. Yeah. This guy just hasn't played a lot of quarterback. Just there's not that much. And
not even his fault, right? Redshirted, and then he started, and then his season got canceled.
It doesn't feel like that's working. I mean, obviously, if he played more football,
is athletic ability, like it's athletic ability creates upside.
Yeah,
you can't Mac Jones,
but I think that
arm strength or add.
Yeah, if Mac Jones had only played 16 games, we wouldn't be saying the same stuff about him.
It has to do with It has to do with physical athletic ability.
But I also think if he'd played 3 full seasons of dominant football, he might be ahead of Justin Fields. Like that's what I'm saying when I say it cuts both ways. So it feels a little riskier in one hand because you haven't really seen him play that much football.
You're talking about Mac Jones?
No, I'm talking about Trey Lance. Like I can see how you could sit there and go, guys, he's only played 16, 17 games. Think about the possibilities once he plays 3 seasons. And the other side, you'd go, yeah, he's only played 16 or 17 games.
Yeah. Well, when you do a projection, the reason projections are really risky is because a lot of times the projections don't come to fruition, right? It's like when people merge with companies, it's based on just the data. It's like, well, this company makes X numbers. We just bring this in. We get this revenue. Projecting is like, well, we think we can double the revenue or triple it. It's like we think we can 5X this guy's talent. We think we can make this guy infinitely better at X. There's just an unknown. You either fill that gap. And a lot of times, as we've seen, like Trubisky, that gap just never got filled because he was just an inaccurate player. He was short circuit in the red zone. And this is back to what we talked about, I think, on Sunday night when we recorded. This is where the risk is just inherently high. There is an unknown that you will not know until you get the player and you just start playing. You just won't know.
Yeah.
No matter how good you feel, no matter how much talent he has, no matter how great of a coach you are. Part of what makes Mahomes special, I've talked to multiple scouts in the league. Like, sometimes you rewatch the Super Bowl, and you're like, I gained respect for Mahomes. It's like that guy was fucking relentless. They're chasing him. Their defense is we're even talking about Tampa Bay. I think we got a DM the other day. It's like, is this, or maybe I brought it up. Is the Tampa team better than any of his New England teams? Just talent, guy for guy. Like that was an elite talent, right? Especially their front seven come after him. And Mahomes just would not flinch. I mean, it was legendary stuff. If I was a Chiefs fan, I'd be like, that's my guy. He was just overwhelmed, and it was like even the NFL films was Chris Godwin on the sideline. Like, God, this guy's a magician.
Yeah.
How does he keep doing this?
Yeah.
And it's just that's the type of stuff that even Andy and Veach would be like, we were smitten for this guy. He's 50 times the man and player and personality and toughness than we ever could have envisioned. But we didn't know that until we got him, and we already loved him. Well, that's the thing. Like, I don't know. Like you think and you do all the scouting, but whoever they take, but definitely the two Fields, Lance. We won't truly know until you get them. Like all the intangible stuff. Guy, I'm looking at Peyton Manning's rookie line. If a guy, the number one pick in the draft, had this rookie line, I think we would think like he's going to be a disaster.
Led the league in picks, right?
28 picks.
Led the league.
Threw 26 touchdowns. But if I told you that Trevor Lawrence goes to the Jags, they go he went 3-13. They go 3-14, and he goes 26-28. Wouldn't people be like, oh, Urban's a disaster, Trevor Lawrence is overhyped? Maybe that existed back then. I mean, we were 13, but it doesn't feel quite as strong as it would be now.
No, it doesn't. But a part of that, I think, is how it looks, right?